We're looking at some gorgeous weather across the eastern United States. Taste of early fall for the next few days and a couple of nights in the northeast and mid-Atlantic states. Certainly that way here in the southeast of the mountains, where I got down to 46 this morning. Rain in parts of Florida, the Texas coast. We've got showers and thunderstorms in parts of the plains and in the Rockies, and a new tropical depression in the Atlantic. All of that and much more on this exciting, well, not so much, Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County, serving the entire New York, New Jersey tri-state area. Suffolk County is on Long Island, and they have everything you need to make sure your home looks great and is working great, and it's also working in case we get adverse weather like tropical storms and hurricanes, like the 12Z GFS and the 6Z GFS from last night, because everybody's talking about it, including the network news. We've got mulch, topsoil for your yard to make that look great too this fall. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. And don't forget, over the wintertime, the largest supplier of rock salt anywhere, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. Joe?
Okay, so I wasn't kidding when I said just now about, excuse me, all of a sudden got a little frog in my throat. I wasn't kidding when I was saying to you, once upon a time, Joe, once upon a time, you would not even hear about a tropical. I won't even go back to the time when you wouldn't even hear about them at all until after they made landfall. But once upon a time, they would at least wait till there was a watch or something that was up before you would get it, get some information. We barely have a tropical. I mean, we have a tropical depression in the central Atlantic. In a central Atlantic, tropical Atlantic, has there are no tropical storm watches up yet for the Leeward Islands. There probably will be maybe tomorrow morning. And they on ABC News, wasn't in the first block or in the second block. It was at the third block where they said, and when we come back, we'll have the latest tropical threat for the East. Okay, and I'm saying, I am not listening to all this. Come on, can we stop? I was thinking, if nothing happens, and there is a high probability, because you and I both know over a 10-day period like this, there's a high probability that something like this is not going to happen. If it doesn't happen, how do they even go justify what they did, what they would have put on 9 or 10 days earlier? They don't. They don't.
I'm tired of this. I
It's
really am.
it's
I've been dealing with
annoying.
this now. I've been dealing with this kind of stuff now for over 40 years, and it's only gotten worse instead of getting better. And you know what? I almost wished I wasn't still doing this kind of stuff, because then I wouldn't even have to deal with it on a daily basis and make any explanations. I'd have to make any logical explanations, Lucy, about the vagaries of looking at one singular computer model, which I might point out yesterday didn't even have a clue as to where this thing was 10 days out. Now, you look at the 10-day outlook, 240 hours from now, the darn thing looks like it's lifting up and heading right for the mid-Atlantic and the northeastern United States. And I don't even want to deal with this. I don't even want to think about this, but we have to. So they're already trying to scare people. So yes, there is something out there. It may very well develop. Will it develop? Will it take a track that'll threaten the eastern United States? You know, nobody could say for certainty or surety. So why? I'm not going to break a sweat over it.
No, I understand. After looking at the models today and everything else, there's always a number of moving parts to these things, and especially now as we get deeper into September, it's not just a simple matter of looking at, say, a ridge, a high pressure ridge, and the hurricane is traveling underneath the high pressure ridge, and it's keeping it from turning. There's sometimes when you get them in August, it's fairly, a little more straightforward. You start to get deeper into September, and then you're dealing with these systems that are coming down in the northern stream that are going to have impact on how these things go. There are, and in this particular case, there are so many moving parts to the overall pattern across the northern hemisphere. You've got not one, but two typhoons in the Pacific, potentially recurving uh, and moving up, eventually winding up. One definitely gets into the Gulf of Alaska, and that creates all sorts of downstream activity in terms of where the troughs are and where the ridges are. So, and now we've actually, as I said, we have two of them. There are going to be two of them out there in play. So expect a lot of model volatility going forward over the next, you know, number of days while this thing is out there, because there's too many pieces here with models having to and the models having to handle all of them. So I don't know. I think you could make a case for it going uh, uh, straight west northwest and eventually maybe winding up in Florida, the Gulf of Mexico. I think you can make a case for it going westward and going into the Caribbean eventually. Which that's probably less likely. But as I said, with all this stuff going on, don't focus your attention at this stage of the game on anything that a model does.
Right. Absolutely. And I noticed that the 12Z took this system, and I guess it's going to eventually turn into Fiona. That's the next name on the list.
Yes.
And whereas the 12Z, took it right up into our area by the 25th of September. Now the new intermediate run kicks the storm off the mid-Atlantic coast east of the outer banks of North Carolina and away from the Northeast.
Right. Well,
on the new run. So that's yet another potential.
I mean, and that's because of the timing of whatever's upstream. And
right.
If it's faster, if it's slower, if it's even there, that's the other possibility, that there's all that noise coming down from the north. What if that's all nonsense? Or a lot weaker? Then that changes things up and down the East Coast. It has implications for Florida, implications for the Southeast, implications for Bermuda. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous that we're talking about all this now. Yeah.
Yes.
It's wrong. So since we're starting out with that, let's might as well start with it on the satellite. So I am going to bring up said satellite here. Welcome to everybody on the chat board, by the way, to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. If you like the show, do please hit the like button, because it makes Joe and I happy. And also, if you have any questions or comments, participate in the conversation that goes on nightly on the chat board.
Also, Joe, I just did a change in the what the National Hurricane Center has been doing in recent years. Yeah, back in the day, they'd put a depression on the map, and they'd say, okay, we're watching it. Now, it's no longer that situation. Now they put a depression on the map, and now they actually have things like static images, interactive maps for where the thing may go, whatever. I mean, they're treating it almost as if it were already a tropical storm or a hurricane, showing you the prospective path all the way out till next Monday. They never used to do this with just a measly depression, but now I guess they're jumping on the wagon and saying, okay, well, it's a depression. We might as well. This is why, I think, in part, why the evening news people, all the networks or whatever, are saying, oh, hey, this is going to be a problem. Because the Hurricane Center now is providing you with a track for a storm that hasn't really fully developed yet, all the way out to into this weekend, and showing the path and showing how it's going to track relative to Puerto Rico, to the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and that last few images or the last few projected forecast track showing that curve taking place to the north and west, aiming it toward the Bahamas. And, of course, then you've got like these G.I. Joe forecasters, especially the ones that have probably just come out of college or have been around for only a year or two, they say, all right, now let's see. We take that and let's extrapolate it. Well, if it goes along that path, then by early next week, it's going to be somewhere along the southeastern United States. Enough
Yeah.
already.
So Johnny Quest on the chat board asking about how could this system form with the upper low that we were talking about yesterday in the trough that is off the East Coast. Well, one of the things that we was saying last night was, does that trough get out of the way? And if you look at the loop, yesterday the trough and upper low were covering a large portion of the southwestern Atlantic. That upper low is actually drifted northwestward. So it looks like it's getting out of the way. I'm not seeing much of any shear going on north of Puerto Rico and north of the Leeward Islands. There's probably some moderate mid-level shear that I can't really pick up on this loop. I would need something a little more close up and detailed to see it, but from what I'm seeing, there's not a whole lot of shear. Meanwhile, you also can see the bursting convection that continues around said tropical depression, and the center low-level circulation is right on the edge of this. It looks a lot like Earl did in its formative stages yesterday, where we had two splits of convection and nothing much in the middle. Well, now the westernmost split of convection is weakening, and the easternmost, and that's where the center is expanding. So it's not the most ideal conditions here for strengthening, but there's enough here that you probably will see this become a tropical storm in similar fashion to the way Earl did. Uh, the one difference, Joe, is the fact that I'm looking at the clouds to the north of the depression and also north of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and near Hispaniola. They're all moving from east to west. So I'm thinking that this will probably have a much more westerly component of motion for a longer period of time, and that that means that the Northern Leeward Islands might be at risk here going forward.
Well, the on the technical discussion, they have the storm currently at 35 miles per hour. They jump it up to 40 miles per hour by 2 o'clock in the morning on Thursday morning, and then to 45 mile per hour by 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And then from then there on, Joe, from tomorrow afternoon, a 24-hour position and strength, 45 miles per hour. It remains at 45 miles per hour all the way out through 120 hours. It goes all the way out to the 19th of September, which is next Monday at 2 o'clock. So, I mean, there you go. We have a storm that really doesn't show, according to the latest forecast positions and max wind guidance, doesn't show any kinds of significant or substantial strength. It said it strengthens 10 miles an hour between now and 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And then it just sits on 45 miles per hour through the rest of the week, through the weekend, and into the start of next week with no indication or no sign of any kind of significant strengthening or diminishing of strength. So 45 miles per hour, that's not even a major tropical storm. But again, I guess in part due to the fact that it's expected to interact with land areas like Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, which can be rather mountainous and could also chew up any kind of tropical system. So I guess they're saying, all right, well, maybe when it lifts away to the north and northwest, away from those Caribbean islands early next week, there's a chance it might start strengthening. But who wants to look that far out? Of course, who wants to look that far out? Yeah.
Well, the spaghetti plots, if you look at the spaghetti plots, they're clustered, not all of them. There's actually a few more outliers later this afternoon that start to turn it north, a little more northwest, and they go north of the northernmost leewards, just north of Puerto Rico, and north of the Dominican Republic. At least the center does. But there's enough of them that take it, right over those islands. And we know that Puerto Rico's got mountains, and we know that the Dominican Republic and the island of Hispaniola is quite mountainous, and that disrupts circulation. So there's a lot here. There's a long way to go. We don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know what happens. What's going to happen. Once it gets say into the northern leewards and moves towards the Virgin Islands. There's still some shear going on in the Western Caribbean and the Eastern Caribbean, so that could certainly be a factor. So yeah, way too many variables here. And in fact, the intensity guidance. I think what struck me with the intensity guidance is that only one model turns this into a hurricane. And I'm guessing that if we looked at, whatever the HWFI is in terms of what kind of track it probably has a track that goes north of those islands by a fair distance and stays all completely over open water. And that's the reason why it has it strengthening almost up to a category 4. But none of the others. The ship's model toward the end of the forecast period has it right on the line of a category 1. The rest of them are all either low to mid-level tropical storm. There are even a few of them that never actually quite get there, or just if they do get to a tropical storm, they weaken it back to a depression. Those probably have more land interaction routes that are being indicated. So again, you're not going to get much clarity here with what's happening. And this is the new GFS, by the way, which has a system going just east of the Bahamas, turning northward, and then turns northeast as a hurricane and passes well southeast of Delaware, New Jersey, Long Island, and southeastern New England, and gives a ride to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland coming up from the southwest. But we can go back to that's the latest run. If you want to go back to the previous run, the hurricane here turns northward and then arcs back northwestward. Not many storms do this. I mean, some have, but not many. Arcs back northwestward and moves basically north-northwest and then just west of due north, right up the coast, right over Long Island, all the way up into New England and into eastern Canada. So, and that's one of so many possibilities. I think the most important thing here, Mr. Rayo, that we need to look at is specifically the differences in the upper air, okay, which are astounding from the 18Z run, which on next Friday, now we're talking next Friday here, has all of a sudden the complete opposite of what the prior run had, which is a big closed upper high sitting right over Maryland and Virginia, a 594 height plus. Okay, and you've got the big ridge pushed all the way up here, and this system is sort of cradled underneath that. And when I saw this before the later maps came out, I said, well, you know what? If that ridge is real and it's going to hold, you can certainly make a case for it just going west or west-northwest forever, and maybe going into Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, deep trough that runs back in the western plains and into the southwest. Now, let's run back to that's a 12Z run, by the way, the 12Z run.
Right.
So,
right.
So from here, that ridge slides out to the east fairly quickly, and you see how the upper feature that represents this tropical system. This is the reason why it gets pushed back to the west, because there's no escape route. There's a trough on Wednesday that's off the east coast. It misses right. See right here, there's an opening. Right here on Wednesday of next week, and you have to think that if this works out this way, there's nothing that says that it can't exploit this opening and recurve. But because that ridge is sliding to the east and building, it forces it back on that northwest course that I showed you. And then, of course, as the ridge slides out, all of a sudden there is a not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, but a 7 contour cutoff sitting over Lake Superior that picks this thing up and then just barrels it up the eastern seaboard. Okay.
Right.
Now, I don't know about. There's two things I want to say about this. You rarely see 7 contour cutoffs in September in the lower Great Lakes. Okay.
Right.
On the other hand, we just had a several contour cutoff that sat in the Great Lakes for a couple of days. So I'm not going to say it's impossible. Maybe it's overdone, but this kind of idea is certainly not out of the question. Okay, but let's look at the 18Z. And again, we talk about moving parts. The 18Z says no, no. The trough on Wednesday, well, it misses that. Okay, the ridge builds, and then it slides out. But then it's got another trough that's moving off the coast of Maine to New Brunswick on Friday.
Labrador.
Yeah, and then that lifts up to the northeast. That creates an escape hatch. So now we've got this digging trough. I mean, this is this then the trough digs down, doesn't cut off, but it is an animal trough. But because there's something on the GFS on Friday of next week in southeastern Canada that creates a second opening, the system exploits that and gets carried out to the northeast just offshore.
It's almost like the system coming down through the Great Lakes is punting, if you will.
Yeah.
The tropical Fiona, let's call it Fiona.
Again, this is because of timing. I mean, it's
right.
a matter of timing. So
right,
and that's certainly possible. Then we have the European, which has nothing. I mean, it has the storm, but it doesn't. What the European does, it says that Friday shortwave picks it up long before it gets anywhere close to the East Coast, and actually tracks it south of, it's southwest of Bermuda by the time we get to next Saturday, which is the end of the forecast period. And if you look at the flow on the European next weekend, across the United States, it's mostly west to east. Guess what? That thing's going out if that's the case.
Right.
So, and what, you want to look at the Canadian? We could do the Canadian.
I saw the Canadian. You talk about a difference between the GFS and the European. Show them where the Canadian wants to move this.
Now, I'm going to show you. Well, I'll put the upper air is up on the Canadian, but you'll see what happens again going at the end of next week. Here's your high, but it actually keeps this system and barrels it along so that by the time we get to Tuesday, it's somewhere in the Florida Straits. And then it goes west right into practically to Tampico or toward the southwest Gulf of Mexico. Because I think what it's doing is it keeps it weak, and so it moves in those faster easterly, low-level easterlies. And you'll see it here. There's the low. This is on Saturday. It has it already between Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and doesn't do much with it until it gets toward the Florida Straits, and then it starts to develop. So look, if you have a weak system that stays weak and starts moving westward at 15 or 20 miles an hour, and gets to the feature crosses Hispaniola, then crosses Cuba. If you're sitting with something that far left come next Monday night or Tuesday, yeah, it's going in the Gulf of Mexico. So there's your other possibility, and
if there's any kind of disaster forecaster, let's say in the New Orleans market, I can just see that say, like, well, one of our models is actually showing, and then he shows the track taking it into the Gulf of Mexico. And so this is one that we have to watch. Some of the people are watching along the eastern seaboard, but there is that possibility. It's not out of the question. It could come in and go,
one thing I never did over the years was I never really went model shopping, not in the long range. I'd have my forecast, and then if there was something that looked like had a possibility, I would indicate that. But this is model shopping. You know how I love forecast shopping, Joe, and people shop around for forecasts, and they, you're saying this. Well, how come you're saying this, but so and so is saying that? They never bothered. Right. I always wonder, do they go to the other person and say, well, how come you're saying this, but Joe Rayo is saying that?
Yes.
Eddie, did you ever think about that? Did they ever go to the other? I often wonder if the other person that's mentioned is ever involved in the conversation where they had the opposite set to them. Here's the cutoff low, by the way, we just talked about for earlier this week on Monday. It was wrapped up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, look at this. 1, 2, 3, 1. I can't, my eyes are so bad. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 contours cut off near Chicago on Monday, Joe. So if it just happened now, you know how patterns like to rhyme. Who's to say that it can't happen again?
Well, somebody on the chat board already, it's Rick B. Rick B says, Canadians wrong. I just you look at it about it. Well, all right, they're wrong. Get it out of here.
Well, we all reflexively say the Canadians wrong, no matter what it does. But here we got the trough lifting out. Back to our own issues, and of course we were left with a nice ridge here in the eastern part of the United States with this cool air mass until we get to the weekend where the trough's pulling out, the ridge is sliding to the coast. We're going to warm up nicely back into the 80s, I think, some places as early as Saturday, and maybe low to mid 80s or maybe even mid to upper 80s on Sunday. Now we do have this deep trough dropping down the west coast. There's your big ridge that builds over Arkansas on Tuesday. Now here, the European, by the way, Joe, last night had showers here Sunday from a front coming down from the northwest, and the GFS is keeping that front up near the Canadian border. And I noticed this afternoon the European has some showers Sunday night, but it's backed off from what it had. It's much further to the north, and I'm right now I'm just kind of leaving it out. I'm not even putting anything in the forecast for Sunday night. There's some kind of front on Monday. And a cutoff low that drops down. Look at that there. Look at that cutoff. And we're looking at the Canadian here, by the way. Drops a cutoff off the Gulf of Maine down to off the southeast coast. And, of course, you see what's Fiona in the Gulf of Mexico at this point. I'll switch to the GFS, and we'll see what kind of world it has.
And, I don't even understand why. I really don't understand why I continue to put a forecast every day or most every day on my Facebook page. I put a Hudson Valley weather forecast, and it's not difficult to read or understand. Today, tomorrow night, Friday. Then I put an extended forecast: Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Right? Very easy. I mean, you look at it. I say Saturday, sunny to partly cloudy. Sunday, sunny to partly cloudy, turning more humid. Monday, partly sunny, risk of a late shower. And I get a comment here on my Facebook page. I won't mention who the person is. I won't mention the name. But she says, Joe, I'm at a golf outing and dinner event to benefit a memorial scholarship fund on Monday. How do you think the weather will be in White Plains? And, I mean, Monday, forecast, partly sunny.
Okay.
Risk of a late shower.
So
81. But, I mean, lady...
No.
What do you think I think about for Monday if I'm saying a chance of a late shower?
The answer is Joe. The answer is the forecast that I just put up applies to everybody else but you. For you, for you, showers and thunderstorms, possibly accompanied by locally heavy rains and frequently dangerous lightning. Or how about when you put a forecast, you make a forecast that you say whatever you like how you say it, and then somebody says, "Well, what's it going to be like?" and then they give you their prospective zip code. Okay, it's
right.
Do you know?
That does happen.
Yeah,
it happens.
You're wasting. Those people are wasting my time.
When I was working at a private weather forecasting service, one of the things we did was movie companies. They used to pay us to get an exclusive forecast for a specific time frame that they were going to film or shoot a scene for a movie. And I remember there was one company, and took a phone call from them. They want to know what it was going to be like on a specific, like tomorrow. If they're calling up and finding out what the weather forecast is for tomorrow, and I tell them, I say, there's a major storm coming in on the Pacific, and there'll be rain beginning in the morning, be heavy in the afternoon, winds will be gusting to 30 or 40 miles per hour. Went through this whole litany of what was going to take place. And after I finished, there was a long pause. And the guy who I'm speaking with, who was one of the directors or producer, whatever, he said, let me explain exactly why we need sunny weather tomorrow. and he explains to me that they need sunny weather for this particular shot, which is very, very important. And if they can't do it, it's going to cost them X number of dollars. And I wanted to say to the guy, I said, oh, well, if you really need it that badly, then the storm I just mentioned is coming in for tomorrow and it's going to bring you all that rain and wind. Forget about that. We'll go for mostly sunny. Will that make you happy? Mostly sunny skies? They don't listen. They only want what they want. And
well, people only hear what they want to hear.
That's true. That's true.
That's always that really boils down to it. I learned that I learned that a long time ago. People will only hear what they want to hear, and if you tell them otherwise, it doesn't matter because they're not even listening. They're not even listening to you. So let's go back to we get like this every once in a while. Let's go back to the GFS for the weekend. As we know, it's going to be lovely. By the way, 46 here this morning, Joe, was the low. 46.
Yeah.
So there's your high. It's going to reform pretty much off the coast by the time we get to Saturday. You can see on Sunday there's showers up in Maine, northern Vermont, and New Hampshire. This is what the European actually has down to about New York City during Sunday night. I've left that out. I don't think it's going to be quite that far south. You have a low that's running through the Great Lakes. By the way, there's a deep trough coming into California down the West Coast, and there's a low off the California coast that actually brings rain in to California come Sunday night and Monday. Not a tropical system, however. But anyway, back to the east. This low is going to go by. We've got a cold front. It's not that much cooler really behind it for Tuesday and Wednesday, so it's still going to be on the very warm to humid side if this new GFS is correct. And then, of course, how do those puzzle pieces work toward the end of next week? Big high to the north. Look at that. This is a what is that? A 10:30? Yeah, it's a 10:30 high over Lake Superior with some easterly isobars here. This will make a cool late week, and then up goes the hurricane. Here comes the system in the west. The timing is different on this run, which is why it's doing what it's doing. Yes, that's blue in south central Canada, folks. The blue snows are starting to appear. And again, at the point we're at late next week, how do these upper air puzzle pieces, how are they going to, what are we going to be dealing with? And what's the deal with the tropical system itself? How do we even know it's going to develop into anything of consequence? We don't. But I'm going to bring up the Pacific because that's one of the things that we need to explore here. And if you'll notice on the GFS, I'm going to bring it back. You actually have 3 tropical systems here from Monday, from back on Monday. There's a hurricane that's going into Shanghai at the moment, believe it or not, or during the next 24 hours or so, followed by another one right behind it. And that one gets down to a 930-ish system to southern Japan, and then lifts up, much like the one last week. This is going to lift up northeastward and eventually find its way into the Gulf of Alaska. And that's going to be that is going to be very important in terms of what happens downstream late next week and beyond. If it takes longer to do that, that's going to delay all these troughs. If it gets up there faster, that's going to speed up the trough that's going to drop into the Great Lakes, which is what the GFS is doing. So that's another player here that we have to consider. Very important players of what's going on out there in the Pacific with these typhoons, spittoons.
Yes.
Look, bottom line, folks, is just whatever you're hearing out there, get it out of your head. You don't have to worry about it now. Worry about it when we tell you to worry about it.
I wouldn't sweat anything right now. I wouldn't sweat any, and I'm not going to be sweating on Friday morning, Joe. I think Friday morning here in Putnam County, we're going to be in the 40s will probably be 48 or 49 degrees. Yes, I know you beat me again
Beat you.
To the 40, but we'll get our fair share of a cool night coming up. I posted on my Facebook page yesterday the CPC forecast for the upcoming 6 to 10 day outlook, which shows well above normal conditions, temperature-wise, probability-wise, from later next week into maybe the start of next weekend. So I don't think we're done with the 80s just yet. We're going to be,
No.
after a brief cool down, we'll be seeing temperatures climb back upwards again for next week.
Yeah, I mean Sunday could be mid to upper 80s. I don't know what stops it. And yeah, next week after whatever a little front that comes through late Monday that doesn't have any cool air behind it, we're back to a west southwest wind and a high to our south. It could be 80s for a good chunk of next week until we can work out whatever we need to work out with respect to any supposed tropical system. There was no advisory scheduled for 8 o'clock because there are no tropical storm watches up at the moment, and I just gave NHC the site a quick check, and sometimes if they're going to change something, they might do it close to what might be an advisory time or a intermediate advisory time, but they didn't do anything, so they'll probably wait till 11 o'clock. I don't think there's a recon scheduled. They would have said something, I would think, if they were. There are some unassigned missions that are out there, but I'm not seeing anything. And as far as I want to take a look here. You've got I'm looking at the systems out in the Pacific. You have 14W, 15W, and 16W. Buifa, Merbach, and Nammadal. Okay. They got to put these. They got the Nammadal. Nammadal. You know what? We'll wait till we'll let the news people handle those typhoons.
Yes.
Yes. But anyway, so who's got Briller Jeopardy tonight? You or me? I don't know if I have. Do I have it?
I don't. I think you must have it because I didn't get anything today from Mr. Briller.
Oh yeah, I do have it. Okay, because this is a simple one because we've been doing retired hurricane names this week. Okay, and Joe, are you ready for the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there has only been one P storm and one W storm that were retired. So you need to name those two.
Well, I think that the W storm was Wilma.
Yes, or Wilma. Yes, Wilma is correct. Lowest, that was in 2005, and Wilma's lowest pressure 882 millibars. 26.05. I think that's a record in the Atlantic Basin.
And you know what Wilma was famous for, right?
The wind damage, I know, but you're probably going to tell me something else.
Wilma was the one that knocked Al Roker off his feet.
Yes.
While he was covering it for the Today Show, and I believe this came before Al had his big operation where to take off a lot of weight. And he was still a big heifer at that time. I mean, he must have been close to 300 pounds.
What did you call him?
A big heifer.
Oh God.
Well, Joe, even he admitted. I mean, he must have been pushing like 300 pounds, and yet this storm, Wilma, literally, while he was reporting on it for the Today Show, literally, and it was shown over and over and over again, literally knocked him off his feet. And it must have been a pretty strong wind gust to be able to do something like that. And poor Al, he just down he went. And I think after that happened, I think the folks who determined that they're going to retire a name said, we're definitely retiring Wilma after that.
Well, a couple. We already have the answer correct on Rich Rothmansky
It
has
was a
the.
Category 5. It was a Category 5 storm with winds of 185 miles per hour. This was Wilma in 2005. And might I also point out, Wilma waited until the middle and latter part of October to strike. So again, if you think that we haven't seen anything up to this point of significance and that we're not going to see much of anything through the rest of September and into October, wrong, because October can be quite a month. They're still quite active, and Wilma was just. But also the Wilma, my goodness, that was the W storm. That was one of those really active, super active years where we saw a lot of stuff happening. Greater Antilles, Central America, Yucatan Peninsula, and where Mr. Roker was covering it for the Today Show, Florida, when it huffed and puffed and blew Big Al down in 2005.
So we have the P storm. Rich Rothmansky has gotten it. He's got the correct answer, but you haven't gotten the correct answer. So can we get your guess? Any ideas?
A P storm?
P storm. The only P storm.
The only P. Dear, can you give me a hint? At least what decade or what?
2000. It's in the 2000s.
Okay.
Between 2000 and 2010. Let's see. It was the 7th most intense November Atlantic hurricane on record.
Gee, I can't. I have to tell you, Joe. I just, I'm male or female?
Female.
Female. No, it's not Patricia, and it's not Patty or. I'm not going to get this. I don't think I'm going to.
It was Hurricane Paloma.
Now, how many people do you meet? Have you met named Paloma?
Not many. And the impact areas are Central America, Jamaica, Cayman Islands, Cuba, Bahamas, and Florida.
Wow.
Yeah. Let me just Paloma. I'm reading this real quick. At the time, it was the 6th most powerful November hurricane on record, behind only the 1932 Cuba hurricane, 2020 hurricanes Iota and Eta, and a tie with 1999's Lenny and 2001's Michelle. It also marked the first time that at least one major hurricane formed in every month of the hurricane season from July to November, with only June not having a major hurricane that year.
Wow.
That's pretty interesting.
The reason why I'm laughing is I'm just looking at a comment that Chuck Cardillo put on the chat board. I'm not even gonna read it out loud. You want to see what I'm alluding to? Just look for a comment that was made by Chuck Cardillo on the chat
yes,
board.
I just saw it.
Yes.
Very good, Chuck. All right, Leon Probitsky hit Super Chat tonight. Thank you, Leon. Most appreciated. Paul Roman says the Mets are drawing a blank. They're losing 6-0.
What is this with the Mets all of a sudden? I mean, they're playing teams that have no right to be in the same league with them. I mean, the teams that are made up of a bunch of Scribinis, but the Cubs are really playing the role of spoilers here. And 6-0 already. I mean, I don't understand what's happening to the Mets. Then this will be their 4th consecutive. Well, they've lost. They've lost. This will be their third in a row that they've lost.
You're not.
3 other times they've lost 3 in a row. Now they're going to lose 3 in a row again.
You're not supposed to
tonight.
be doing this in September.
No, you're not. They're playing. They're going to be playing a bunch of teams that really aren't in the same class with them. I mean, the Mets. The next time the Mets win a ball game, it'll be their 90th victory, and yet the Cubs haven't even won more than 55 or 58 games. It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't understand what's going on with them.
No. All right, so
and James Davison, the Mets always shock at the end. I think he meant choke.
Choke or shot, yeah. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. The Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the phone number, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com, Joe.
yes.
I always have to keep reminding you what the website is.
I know, but I always have to tell you what the phone number is.
Yes.
So we'll be back tomorrow night. Maybe we'll have a tropical storm on the map. Maybe we won't. Maybe we will probably have some models bringing it up the East Coast, but we'll also have ones that won't. And we'll talk about this again, see what the future holds when we come back tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern Time. Nighty night, everybody.
Good night, folks.